Breaking news, Caleb Wilson has suffered an injury and will be out in the Pitt game. UNC basketball made a report today saying University of North Carolina freshman Caleb Wilson is out with a fracture in his left hand, an injury he suffered in the first half of Tuesday's game at Miami. X-rays taken during the game were negative, and he returned to play later in the second half versus the Hurricanes, but additional imaging done in Chapel Hill revealed the fracture. The evaluation process is ongoing to determine the timetable for Wilson's return. Now we're going to get into all of it, the timetable for his return, the next games for UNC, and how this could maybe be a positive for Carolina in the long run. And realistically, we're trying to just spin a positive out of what is clearly a negative situation. Prayers up for Caleb Wilson. I hope he returns back quick. So let's get into what this looks like for the Tar Heels from this point on. Now, it's important to note, no timetable for his return has been set. If you look at past basketball players with similar injuries, the timetables kind of vary. You're realistically looking at something between 3 to 6 weeks. And if it is a little bit more major, 4 to 8 weeks. And hopefully he completely avoids surgery. And if it is something that requires surgery, then it could potentially be the end of his college basketball season. And for Carolina fans, this is giving eerily similar effects to what happened with Kendall Marshall, 10 years ago now, I think it's been. So just there are certain things that as a Carolina fan, you don't want to relive. And this is what this is turning into. And realistically, this is worst case scenario for a UNC team that has had a wildly inconsistent season, as well as enough up and downs. They missed Seth Trimble earlier in the season. A lot of fans think they would have beaten Michigan State if he was there. Now you have this situation where you're clearly number one guy, your best player, your dog, your energizer, the whole person that's really stemmed this entire season going somewhat positive, even through some rough times like the West Coast trip, like the loss to Miami earlier this week. It's a devastating blow. It's an absolutely devastating blow. And he's been the most consistent thing for UNC this season. I think the Duke game, him realistically, he had 21 points on 7 of 9 shooting at one point against Duke. He was single-handedly keeping them in the game, keeping them within earshot of Duke to make that final push and pull off that win. And if you look at the start of the season, this was Carolina's original big situation. You had Caleb Wilson, Henry Vasar, Zayden High, James Brown, and Ivan, which was a transfer from High Point. Most people believe Ivan was never really going to play. It was kind of just one of those last roster spot gets. But Caleb, Henry, Zayden, and James were what was supposed to make kind of this four-headed monster of all guys, 6'10", 6'11", up, to really bolster having Carolina some big depth. And realistically, Zayden High has really struggled this year and been almost unplayable. I think he played his most minutes in ACC conference play against Miami, and that was only 7 or 8 minutes. So again, he just hasn't been there. Ivan, I believe, is hurt as well. James Brown is hurt. And now you add Caleb to that list of injuries and problems inside, which means Carolina is basically down to Henry and Zayden for their bigs. And this leaves, I think, Hubert in a weird situation to figure out, 1, the lineup, 2, the style of play you're going to do for however long Caleb is out. And then what do you do with Jaren? Because Jaren is a guy that I think should be starting at the 3 with Henry and Caleb. Had High and Brown been more serviceable in that 4-5 rotation, I think you would have seen Jaren in his more natural position. But we've had to see at times Jaren come off the bench just to give some sort of rotational pattern for Henry and for Caleb. And if we look at what this lineup is probably going to be at this point, I think projected you have to go Dixon, Trimble, Vasar. Those are the locks. I would throw Jaren in there as a lock as well. And that leaves Powell, Evans, Luka, Zayden High, and Young. I don't think he'll start High. I think you have to go High and Vasar as basically your 5s and just rotating out as whatever you need. You're going to have to ask a ton of Henry to play probably 35 plus minutes and Zayden High to just buy time when you can. Hopefully Henry's able to stay out of foul trouble, which he has done for most of the season. And if we look at Luka and we look at Evans, they're guys that do add perimeter shooting if they're catching and shooting. But outside of that, they've really struggled. Evans has been decent at distributing the basketball, but he struggles defensively as well as Luka. And I think with this lineup with Caleb Wilson out, you have to prioritize defense and rebounding. And if that's the situation, I think the obvious answer is to go Powell. I think if you go Powell, he's someone that plays hard defense. He does still stretch the floor and can hit those corner threes, especially if he's hot. He will get out in transition. He will hit the offensive glass. He will hit the defensive glass. And even there's been times this year where those stats don't show up in the numbers, but he's had tip outs. He's gotten loose balls. He's been one of those Tar Heels that has been aggressive in the 50-50 balls, which I think we missed tremendously in the Miami game. And he was a guy that played 20 minutes off the bench and was a big piece of them even kind of staying in that game, in my opinion. So I think you've got to go Powell in the starting lineup. Whether you basically have your 2, 3, and 4, which are kind of rotatable. You got Dixon at the 1, Henry at the 5, and then your pal Seth and Jaron in between those 2-3-4s are guys that are just going to have to gang rebound by committee, help Henry out. Zayden High is going to have to produce for Carolina, however long this stint lasts. But it's a tough situation. Now, like we said earlier, is there any way this could be a positive for Carolina? I think when you look at a team like Kansas, and if you've watched them play basketball this year, they've played a lot of minutes and a couple games without Darren Peterson, who's clearly their best player, who's clearly a top 3 pick in this year's draft, similar to Caleb Wilson. And so if you look at that team has really dug deep. They've become extremely aggressive. They've played really good basketball together. While it hasn't always been the prettiest, they have wins over Tennessee without Peterson. They've got a win over Arizona earlier, late last week without Peterson. And they took UConn to 5 points without Darren Peterson. And that's not even including the multitude of minutes in other games in the Big 12 and non-con that he left the game early and didn't play even 25 minutes in. So when you look at that, it is possible for teams to have success without their best player. I think a way this could be a positive is that in the Duke game, you saw Caleb do a ton. We've had multiple games where Caleb has been the superstar, and everybody's kind of looked at him to start certain defensive possessions. Go back to the Kansas game when he had the 10-second violation basically by himself, picking up full court. He's been a menace a lot of times in the press, just causing length and disruption. We saw Miami turn the ball over a couple of times in that. It was a big thing in the Cal game to add that press. And so maybe now these other guys have no choice but to step up. Maybe they develop more confidence if they are able to pick up some games that people might say they should end up losing now without Caleb Wilson. And if Wilson is able to return maybe by the Duke game in Cameron on March 7th, which is about 3 to 4 weeks away now, I think, maybe they go into the ACC tournament and in March. They've picked up a couple more wins, probably a couple more losses. But if the team is gelling a bit better and you have guys having more confidence and you add Caleb back into that rotation, you could maybe have a boost into a good March Madness run, which is going to be really important, I think, for this group, this program, and Hubert Davis to have this year after the so many ups and downs we've had, not only this season, but in past seasons as well. Is that likely? No. Is this worst case scenario for North Carolina? Realistically, yes, it definitely is. It's not a situation you want to be in. You never want to go to any game in the country without your best player, without your stud, without your superstar. And we're honestly really hoping that Caleb is able to get back soon. Whether you're a UNC fan, you're not a UNC fan, you cannot deny he has been one of the most exciting and entertaining players to watch in college basketball this season. Last thing we're going to do, next games for UNC. So they go Pitt on Saturday, which that is a team that has constantly given North Carolina fits, and it does make for an interesting matchup. I think Carolina ends up pulling that one out in the sense of maybe there's a wounded warrior back against the wall. They just come out and play, which is what Pitt has done to UNC multiple times and having guys hurt, which they're dealing with some health issues as well. So I think Carolina is able to get that win. You then go to NC State on Tuesday on February 17th. That now is going to be extremely tough. I think you had a massive matchup advantage against NC State in the interior with Henry and Caleb against where NC State doesn't quite have that size. They'll play small ball. I think if UNC is forced to play small ball with NC State, it poses a big matchup problem for North Carolina. One, NC State is used to playing that way. They've done that all season long. They want to get up and down. They want to shoot a ton of threes. You know how it's going to be in Raleigh. It's going to be absolutely rocking. It's a personal game for a lot of those people at NC State. I don't feel that it's the same for UNC players as it is for NC State players. So that makes that game really intriguing and honestly a potential scary matchup for North Carolina. Beyond that, you go to Syracuse. I think they'll be fine in that, even given the 32-point lead down to 7 in the matter of like 6 minutes in that game in Chapel Hill. They were in control of that game most of the night. I think they'll be fine. But then at that point, you go Louisville, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and Duke. You're potentially staring down the barrel of 3, maybe 4 losses. Virginia Tech has been another inconsistent team, but they do have some solid wins. They've also beat Virginia. They beat Clemson last night as well. Louisville has guys that can go. And the thing with Louisville is they pull those bigs out. They have guys like Khalifa, Frew that are bigs that can play multiple different ways, pull it out, and they've got guards and shooters all around. That was going to be a tough matchup with North Carolina, even fully healthy because of the guard play that Louisville has. That's something UNC has struggled with a ton this year. But again, now without your best player in Caleb Wilson, if he is still out at that point against Louisville, it poses a massive matchup nightmare for the Heels in that one. Again, with Virginia Tech, we talked about, and then Clemson is just one of these solid teams that's difficult to deal with. I do like them more in the Clemson game than I do in the Louisville game. And then maybe Caleb is back for Duke and Cameron on March 7th. And then you're into ACC play. And realistically now, I think the double bye is completely out the window for UNC. They are going to need to beat State, beat Louisville, I think, and then all like they could lose maybe 2 more games and still potentially get that 4 seed. I still don't see that happening because everybody else is in front of them. They don't have a tiebreaker with Miami. They don't have the tiebreaker with SMU. So again, it's just a lot of just jumble in that middle pack right now for the ACC. And if Carolina drops a game to State, if they drop to Louisville, you can really just kiss that double bye goodbye, which means Carolina could potentially be playing, what, 4 or 5 games in the ACC tournament. But again, might not be a bad thing. If they are in that situation, extra games for Caleb, maybe he gears up better and he's able to go and the team's okay and you can kind of continue to instill confidence. But it's a tough situation for UNC. It's a really tough break for them. I do hope that he is back soon. Prayers up for him, and hopefully it's not. It's a best case scenario in a situation that is really negative. And the other positive with it is his offhand. So it's not his shooting hand, it's his left wrist. So usually that does bode a little bit better. And a fracture can be better than a full break, depending on where the fracture is. But we'll just have to see what comes out as more information gets out on this. But again, guys, appreciate you being here. Please hit like, hit subscribe in your name in the portal, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.